Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to Cabinet this afternoon. Can I welcome our guests at the back as well? Today we will be live streaming, so it is very important that we use our mics so that that can bring the cameras onto us so that anybody who wishes to watch from home can actually see who's speaking. So just try to remember to use your mic and turn it off afterward, please. Also, I'm going to invite Cabinet colleagues to introduce themselves, and I will invite others here to introduce themselves. Can I ask you just to put your mics on when you do that so that people can see who you are and turn them off immediately afterward. I will start. I'm Councillor Peter Fox, leader of Monmouthshire Council.
Bob Greenland, Deputy Leader, Cabinet responsibilities for enterprise, leisure and culture.
Councillor Jeff Burrows, Cabinet Member for Social Care and Health.
Phil Murphy, Cabinet Member for Resources.
Liz Hackett-Payne, Cabinet Member for Education and Learning.
Giles Howard, Cabinet Member for Environment, Public Services and Housing.
Please.
Sarah McGuinness, Chief Officer for Children and Young People.
Simon Birch, Chief Officer, Social Care and Health.
Joy Robson, Head of Finance.
Paul Matthews, Chief Executive.
Peter Davis, Head of Commercial and People Development.
Kelly Byrne, Chief Officer, Enterprise.
Robert Tranter, Head Legal Services and Deputy Monitoring Officer.
Sarah King, Democratic Services.
Dimitri Petruni, Leader of the Labour Group.
Councillor Simon Howarth, Leader of the Independent Group.
Maureen Powell, Councillor Observing.
Ian Bakewell, Housing and Communities Manager.
Ian Saunders, Head of Leisure, Tourism and Culture.
Lisa Knight-Davis, Enterprise.
Dewi Jones, Communications.
Okay, thank you very much, everybody. It's important that everybody at home can actually see who we are and be able to put a name to face. Okay, I'll move us straight on to item 1, apologies for absence. I have 2 apologies for Cabinet, Councillor Brian Jones and Councillor Phil Hobson. Move on to item 2, declarations of interest. As usual, please declare now, or if you do find something as we move through the agenda, please declare it then and fill in the appropriate pro forma with regard to that interest when it arises. Any interest at the moment? Okay, thank you. Okay, let's move on to item 3, the consideration of reports from select committees. We have none before us today, so we'll go straight on to item 4 and to consider the following reports. And the first one is Housing and Regeneration Medium-Term Financial Plan and an Integrated Approach to Housing Options. Councillor Howard.
Okay, thank you, Leader. Firstly, many thanks to Ian Bakewell and team for their work culminating in the report before us today. Members will recall the information presented on previous occasions to both Cabinet and Adult Select Committee, which explained and established the principle for a combined housing options service. The proposals before you have been worked up in conjunction with Torvine County Borough Council and are very much based on the study undertaken by Andy Gale, supported financially by the WRGA. They have been subject to pre-scrutiny, and I thank the Chairman of Adults, Councillor Farley, and his committee members for their constructive input over 3 separate meetings. The purpose of the recommendation to pilot the service for a year is fourfold. Firstly, in supporting our key priority to support the vulnerable, is to continue a focus on tackling homelessness to build upon service improvements. The new housing bill makes this a statutory responsibility from next year, and one that both councils have always taken seriously. The combination of the teams should enable more proactive work. Secondly, the issue of resilience and flexibility. By creating a larger team will allow officers to deal with unexpected demands and users to benefit from their particular expertise. 2 teams will deal with either housing solutions or private sector options, and the workstream models for service delivery are included within the report. Thirdly, sharing of assets and access to a wider range of accommodation rather than B&Bs, as outlined at the bottom of the second page of the proposal, some of which has already happened. Lastly, our intention is that the cost efficiencies will enable both councils to maintain high levels of service delivery in the face of disproportionate cuts to local authority funding from the Welsh Government. I should point out that the Joint Housing Register will continue to be managed by a Monmouthshire Housing Association under a service level agreement. A member should also note the risk assessment included within the body of the report, which deals with the what-ifs. Should Cabinet be minded to approve the recommendation, the process will evolve into a memorandum of understanding and a focus on streamlining and integrating working methods. Leader, we believe this will be the first example of a joint strategic housing service in the UK, and it builds on our good relationship with Torfaen and a wider driver collaboration. So I think it's the right thing to do to protect users and ensure continuity of service. I would therefore like to move the report.
Thank you very much. Ian, is there anything you'd like to add at this point?
I think the only thing I would just add to that is, just in the context of the decision making, is to remember that we've been based now with Torfaen for approaching 3 years, and this project's not it's a natural evolvement. So over the last couple of years we have been working on a number of things, and there is a very close relationship. So this is just a natural progression and formalising that natural progression, really.
Yeah, thanks for that, and thank you, Councillor, for bringing the report. It's a really important function, and it's great to build on the relationships we have there, and it does bode well for the future. And I'm sure Cabinet are going to be minded to support this as an important step forward in this provision. Colleagues, anybody wish to add? Okay, can I go then to Councillor Petruni? Anything to add?
Yes. Thank you, Leader. I have 4 questions, if I may. Relating to the report, it says quite a lot of emphasis on income generation and opportunities, and I've read it, and it hopes to be self-financing in 5 years and generate, I think, £55,000 after 5 years. I've looked at the report, read page 47, which says income generation opportunities, trying to see how you're going to generate the income, like actual concrete policies, and I can't find it anywhere. So if you can enlighten me on how you're actually going to create some income generation, I'll be grateful. Linked to this, I read it's going to be business-like but not business. I wonder how that fits in with how we do our prevention work, because I'm sure we all agree preventing homelessness is the most cost-effective way of saving money and also saving heartache. Third, I noticed a lot of the positions are vacant. Is that because we're new and we're looking to recruit quick soon or anytime in the next couple of weeks? And finally, when will we hear about how many private rented sector landlords are interested, given the new requirement to include them in housing provision? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Petruni. Ian, would you like to answer some of those questions?
I think the comment about the self-funding was a recommendation from Andy Gale in terms of his proposal to the council. As things stand at the moment, we're not in a position to get to the self-funding, but the income generation is a key theme running through the project. Now, whether that will actually get to the stage where we can pay for the whole service, I wouldn't like to say at this stage. But the shared housing that we're now implementing, that is generating considerable income, and the move that we're making towards private sector housing, a lettings agency proposal, is one of the key areas that we're looking to develop. Now, that's very much in its infancy at the moment, and I would say to the Cabinet that we're not fully ready to go with that, but we have the basis of a model that we can potentially expand. There's other areas that we can move into. So, for example, we used to do private leasing. We passed that scheme to Mellin Homes a couple of years ago, but there's no reason why, as an authority, if the appetite was there, that we couldn't do private leasing ourselves. So the main areas are around the private lettings. With regards to being business-like, the intentions, as you'll see from the report, is to establish an advisory type board where we look to invite external people or independent people of the council to become involved with the model, and I guess that would be really a learning curve, and looking to identify opportunities to move away from should we call ours a traditional model, but certainly being very, very focused on working as efficiently and effectively as we can. And I think the work that we've done over the last few years is testament to that, because of the progress we've made in terms of performance, the progress that we've made in terms of income generation, with a smaller complement of staff. You mentioned the vacancies. We've got one position that is vacant at the moment, and because of the work we've been doing with Torvine, we consider it was appropriate to keep that vacancy open, because obviously it may get caught up in this decision, which it has, and I've considered that was the appropriate thing to do. And I think the changes that we've made around working more efficiently, it has generated capacity, and has told us that that position isn't critical in terms of going forward. And obviously, what we're looking to do is use some of that funding to invest in more of a frontline post, and we're particularly thinking around the financial inclusion side of things. And the fourth question I didn't write down, so apologies.
What was the mechanism by how we find out as councillors how well we're doing in terms of how many private sector landlords were getting interested in taking up the social provision?
Yeah, that wouldn't be a problem. I could forward you some information about that shortly. I mean, you'll be aware that a lot of the work that we're doing is about creating the appropriate environment for private sector landlords. At the moment, I can't put my hand on my heart and say that because we're doing the landlord forum or doing the landlords forum differently, it's bringing in extra landlords. What I can say, though, is there is definitely far more interest from landlords. We're having far more conversations with landlords, and we believe that we're getting into a better position with private landlords in terms of I suppose trust and understanding. And we did a survey a couple of months ago and asked the question about, I can't remember the exact wording, but we asked the question about their relationship with the council, and we got a generally positive reply. So we were quite pleased in the response that we got back from that, and there was nothing there that gave me any concerns in terms of our general relationship with private landlords. But I say, just to go back, I'm quite happy to furnish members with some information about the numbers of private landlords that we are working with.
Okay, thank you, Ian. Councillor Howard.
Thank you, Leader. We did last week go through and cross-cut on this report in the Select Committee of Strong Communities and Adults, and we were more happier once we'd scrutinised Ian on the homelessness policy, etc. There was just one question I would like to ask, and we do fully endorse the recommendation. The IT side of it, I noticed in your report the IT will be joint shared, and it did come out last week. There are issues revolving around IT of programmes, etc. When we are in this partnership, would that be a joint partnership on the IT then as well, or would that be joint programme on sorting the IT out and coming back to council and Torvine as well? It's council to decide to try and sort the finance out for it.
Very, very crudely, the IT issue, and the IT issue that came up in Select was around the online assessment tool that we've built into the 4 workstream model. After the meeting, I got confirmation that will be implemented during November. So the online assessment tool should be sorted now. The other main aspect of the IT system is now in relation to the case management. So we run a system on an academy system, and Torvine use an Arbitas branded system. So it's just a case of making a decision: do we go one way or the other? And it's looking more logical to go to the Torvine Arbitas system.
Kelly, did you want to come in and add to that?
Yes, if I could please, Leader. Just some wider context, really, I think, around this report. I think it's important to recognise that our housing service is actually a strong performer, especially now that we've got the data recording issue around homelessness prevention. We know we're at the top of the middle quartile for that, and that is getting better all of the time. The service is on budget. In fact, it's underspending. I had a look at the last quarter statistics around bed and breakfast. Minimal admission to bed and breakfast. I think there are a few young single people, and that's appropriate for them on occasions, but certainly no families. So I do believe the service is operating very well given the current economic conditions. What I would say as well is that around income generation opportunities, this report at this stage is highlighting potential and opportunity. This is the start of a formal process of bringing those two teams together so we can be much more efficient and much more effective. And yes, we've identified some targets in this report, and now we've got options and opportunities through which to meet those. So Ian has described the shared housing scheme, the potential around private sector leasing. Torvine operate their own scheme very successfully. That's an option for us to buy into as well. Ian's highlighted some of the opportunities around a private lettings agency, because we deal with all segments of the market and people come to us because we're reliable and we're trusted. So there's a clear opportunity there. And I think coming back to that second point that Councillor Petruni made, which was really important, how can you be business-like when you're dealing with such, an emotive social issue? We have to be. We absolutely have to be business-like and have a business-like discipline, because if we don't and we're inefficient, then we don't have the resources to scale social impact in an area which I believe is one of the most important to us as a council.
Many thanks for that. That's a really helpful input. We see that this is a one-year pilot, so I presume we're going to have this back to us in about 12 months' time so that we can review its progress, and hopefully it's going to be a really good news story. So on that then, I'll move us to the recommendation. That's to adopt and approve the implementation of the proposal to deliver a combined housing solutions service for Monmouthshire and Torvine on a one-year pilot basis. All in favour of that? Thank you very much. That's carried. Thank you very much, Ian. I'll move on to the next report then, and that is the Education Achievement Service and governance changes. Many of you, well, you all know that we have the South East Wales Education Achievement Service, and it's been providing our school improvement provision and other support services since September 2012. However, from the Minister, there had been a clear direction that there is a need for a change in governance models, and we need to move to a national model, but a slightly different model perhaps in our corner of Wales. I'm going to invite our Chief Executive to talk us through the report, because he's been absolutely key in helping to draft the new model that will support the governance arrangements for the South East Wales Achievement Service. So can I invite Chief Exec in, please?
Thanks, Leader. This is a report which is going to each of the 5 Greater Gwent unitary authorities on or about the same time, so sometime over the next 2 to 3 weeks. There seems to be a bit of a theme to today's meeting already. Your first item was the consideration of a new collaborative arrangement. This is a consideration of an evolving collaborative arrangement, but an arrangement that increasingly is serving us really well. The report signifies that the Minister I guess, endorsed a new national framework, a new national model for regional consortia working within education a little while ago. So each of the 4 consortia across Wales have been required to test the compliance of their arrangements to that model. We've done that, and I think pleasingly in most respects the Education Achievement Service model is fit for purpose. It works. There are very limited changes to make. The arena of governance is one of those, and that's the subject of your report today. But again, we're talking about quite modest changes, actually, rather than fundamental, I would suggest. I suppose the guts of the report you can find in 3.1, where I summate for you the 4 areas of governance that we believe are necessary to take the Education Achievement Service forward. I'm not going to go through them in detail because I know members will have read the report. But in essence, we've had the Education Achievement Service has had a board since its establishment. Don't lose sight of the fact that the Education Achievement Service is a registered company. It's a collaboration, but it's a company that you co-own. So as with any other company, there is a board in situ. A development to comply with the national framework is a need to establish an executive board to work to the main board. And again, the details of that are set out in the report. I have to say that there is one thing that I'm going to need to check. And if members are content with this, I'll confirm accuracy when we minute this meeting. Right at the end of 3.3, you will see, where we're talking about the role of a board member, you will see that it suggests that the executive board has the power to appoint or remove the managing director. I do not believe that's the intent. So I will check that and I will confirm it via the minute. It would seem wrong for me for anything other than the main board to appoint or actually terminate the appointment of a managing director. So I'll query that on your behalf. Continuation of a joint executive group. The executive member with portfolio responsibility has been a member of that group since its establishment, and we see it continuing. We see it as being a necessary link to the portfolio of our council. And since establishment, there's been great interest in ensuring that this model is well scrutinised. And there has been some discussion about how best to do that. Clearly, we, as one of 5 councils, we still hold sovereign responsibility for our education function. It's our business. We have not outsourced the business. We've commissioned the Education Achievement Service to work on our behalf to take us toward the goals that we set for ourselves. Consequently, our own Children and Young People's Select Committee continue to hold a scrutiny responsibility. But there are some aspects of the company itself, the Education Achievement Service as a company, that have merited scrutiny, and we haven't quite nailed until this point in time the best way to do that. Because, for example, it's probably not a productive use of the managing director's time to continually walk around 5 scrutiny committees talking about things such as risk and corporate governance. It is important that the 5 co-owners of this company are assured that those necessary governance issues are in place and well managed. So you will see as part of this report that we are now recommending that the company Education Achievement Service establish an audit committee, as most companies, I would suggest, if not all, have. And their role will be to provide you with an assurance that the Education Achievement Service as a company is well managed, well led, operating to its business plan, etc. But you won't require the Managing Director and his officers to walk around 5 unitary authorities having the same conversations times 5, because if they are doing that, they cannot be doing what you are paying them to do, which is to make a contribution to standards within our schools. So in a nutshell, Leader, Cabinet, they are the recommendations of the report. If you would give me licence to check just that one point in terms of appointment, termination of the Managing Director role, I'd commend those recommendations to you.
Thank you very much, Chief Exec, for that. And some interesting changes, but not massive changes. The EAS model has been serving us well, and I hear your last comments around Managing Director not needing to be scrutinised by every authority. We did have that opportunity, though, last week, and I was really, really pleased as leader to be invited to that scrutiny committee and to be challenged as well by the scrutiny committee as a past board member, but to hear the progress that and the confidence we have now in this service, who really working closely with all of the schools across the Gwent area, Monmouthshire in particular. I'm pleased that the model has a level of teeth and scrutiny within it, because I think the original national model perhaps didn't have enough emphasis around scrutiny. So I'm pleased that the audit committee is going to be in there, because it is absolutely important that we make sure that this company is delivering the model of service we really want and need, and there has to be those checks and balances throughout. Right, I'm going to open it up for points from colleagues. Councillor Hackett-Payne.
Thank you very much, Leader. I welcome this report. I know that an awful lot of hard work has gone into it, and it has gone over many months, if not probably a year or so. The national model brings things into line for Wales, and I think the EAS in many respects is a leading force. I'm very glad that the JEG, the Joint Executive Group, has remained, as I know that the all Cabinet members for education within Wales, through the WLGA, wanted to ensure that that stayed, because originally that wasn't going to be there, which meant it took out any challenge from executive members. And at the end of the day, that the executive member has to be have the position to be able to challenge the EAS and make sure that they are doing what they're being paid to do. So I'm glad that that is there, and I know that as things, as time goes on, it will evolve as much as this has evolved from what we had before. I think it's a good model, and I wish it well, and I hope that that challenge most certainly is there, because we do need to hold the EAS to account. I'm just wondering, just on a personal level, looking at it from the executive member's position, how that executive group, which is only a forum, actually relates back, if it had any issues, to the executive board. That was just a question.
Councillor Greenland.
Yes, I also welcome this report, and I recognise the changes for the better that is going to come to the EAS as a result. I think we mustn't lose sight of the fact that we are not abdicating our responsibility for the improvement of education to this company, because this company is acting on our behalf. We are still responsible for the improvements in education. We are expecting this company to do work, and we are the clients of this company. I particularly welcome the introduction of the executive board, because I think that gives a level of expertise which has been lacking up until now, and I think that will be a really strong addition to the model that is being or has been already introduced for the EAS. So I welcome the report.
Chief Exec, did you want to reflect on points raised at this moment, or do you want to see if there's any more questions first? Okay. Any other Cabinet colleagues? Councillor Petruni?
Yes, thank you. I also welcome increased scrutiny of this service. Just on a question on the role of the audit committee and how we're going to appoint. Have we got an idea how we're going to do it? Where we're going to appoint? Are we going to appoint from CYP? Our 2 members? Because I noticed it's not mandatory. It says, but not required to be. Have we given any thought to that?
I think the report alludes to the fact that we will be bringing this to full council next week as an additional item to our special full council next week, where we can decide who we're going to put on these committees, and also to notify any changes to the board. At the moment, this is suggesting to be drawn from the Children and Young People Select Committee. However, I don't suppose that is fixed in stone, but Chief Executive will reflect on that again in a second. Councillor Howarth, any questions?
Same as Councillor Petruni, really. I do welcome having a select committee or an audit select committee to scrutinise. That's something we did agree all them years ago. I think members now will be relieved that we have finally got some mandate to do that. I think I have read the agenda for next week, and I'm sure further questions will protrude from next week. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you. Chief Executive.
So the 2 questions. First, Councillor Hackett-Payne, which I think is a question about points of influence. If you have something to say, how do you make sure it's heard? I think there are a number of opportunities for you, and I think it depends on the issue to a degree. Your Chief Education Officer, Sarah McGuinness, meets bi-weekly with the Managing Director of the Education Achievement Service, Steve Davis. So you have a very regular conduit there as executive members to potentially have issues considered. If the issue is of a different type, then clearly as a council we have a board member, and you have a legitimate right to speak to that board member and effectively say, I want to make sure that we've got clarity on something or other. And certainly for the next year, you have the opportunity to use me in my role as lead chief executive. So if you're not sure, then I have access to the board, and I have access to all of the chief education officers. So I think you have potentially one of 3 doors that you could walk through depending on the issue. In terms of Councillor Petruni's question, as the leader has said, on the special council on the 22nd of October, you will consider a report which is seeking nominations for 2 vacancies on the audit committee to be drawn from our council. My working assumption is that those vacancies will be filled by members of the Children and Young People's Committee, as has always been the intent. You are right though, Leader, that's not set in stone, that's not a rule, that's not a law, that's something at the behest of the council, but I don't foresee any reason why you wouldn't want to take advantage of the membership of the Children and Young People's Committee, given the expertise that they're developing in this area.
No, thanks very much, and I absolutely agree, and it gives some reassurance to that Children and Young People's Select Committee in their constant need for information of how we're doing, for some representatives from that committee to actually sit on the board. That gives onto that audit committee to really give a good conduit through. However, it's a decision for council next week, but I see the logic behind the recommendation. Okay, I'm going to move us then to the recommendations in 2.1, 2.2 and 2.3. I will read these out for the benefit of people who may be watching in. So 2.1, to endorse a model of governance that captures the requirements of the Wales Government National Model, that in addition to the requirement of the national model, the current joint executive group be retained, and that an audit committee for the company be established. And 2.3, that a report will be brought to the next meeting of council to agree 2 council nominations to the audit committee, and to agree a replacement as a council nominated main board director, given the intention of myself to stand down from that position. So those are the recommendations. All in favour of accepting those? Thank you very much. Okay, we move on to the next item, and this is the School Literacy Resource Centre report. Councillor Hackett-Payne.
Thank you very much, Leader, and there very much is a theme this day at Cabinet of collaboration. The School Literacy Resource Centre goes back many years. Originally, it was a collaboration between 3 authorities, and it worked extremely well. One of the authorities pulled out quite a while ago, and then at the end of June 2014 this year, another of the contributors also pulled out, leaving us basically on our own. We went through the budget forum, the authority went through the budget forum and contacted schools to see if they would like the service to continue through a service level agreement. And in effect, we had only one school coming back saying that that was what they wished to do. So it is, we only have one option, and that is to close the school literary resource centre or the school's library service. And it is with a heavy heart that we do that, but in effect there is no other option. The schools don't want to buy into it, and we have quite a few costs to pay, and being the only authority, it is prudent that we look at reallocating it and actually shutting the centre. So it is an unfortunate position to be in, but it is with a great lot of thought and consultation, and I bring this report to you. I'd like to just bring the Chief Officer Sarah McGuinness in, because actually looking at the report, there is quite a bit of history that goes with this, and it does actually look from the report that we're spending quite a lot of money to save £20,000, and that isn't quite the case. I just wondered if I could bring you in just to expand on that a little, please.
Certainly, I can try and provide some clarity. The split of the costs associated with this service relate to 2 elements. The first being the deficit reserve of 90,000, which has been reported in our financial statements over the last 2 years. And the second relates to the normal running costs for the current year, which, as Councillor Hackett-Payne has just explained, falls entirely to Monmouthshire. If we were to continue with this service, we in Monmouthshire, we'd need to pick up all the costs of running the service. But even scaled down for Monmouthshire, we simply wouldn't have the budget to do that. And we would also be starting with a deficit position of 90,000, and that's not a tenable situation. Equally, as Councillor Hackett-Payne has already mentioned, it's become apparent from Monmouthshire and Torvine schools that the service has little strategic relevance to them as education moves on. We've asked schools to sign up to a service level agreement with the service, and only one school expressed an interest. So this is for us more about an unviable service and minimising the ongoing costs by ceasing now. Were we not to do this now, we would be actually endorsing potentially a £500,000 adverse deficit reserve, which is obviously unacceptable as we move forward.
Thank you for that deeper clarity. I think I agree with Councillor Hackett-Payne. The report on the face of it is slightly simplistic in what it's explaining there, and I think that helps give us some deeper understanding. I note that Torvine have been invited or asked to contribute to share of the winding up costs, if you like. Have we got clarification if they're going to actually do that? Because it looks like we've been standing this alone for some time, and that's not a position I believe we should have been found ourselves in. Is there any update on that?
Torvine have resisted sharing the costs of this, although intent to derive the benefit of surplus reserves from other discretionary partnerships with Monmouthshire. We are clear that Torvine are not sharing any costs with us.
Well, that's pretty disappointing, really. You know, this was a shared service from the start, and sad that we have got to this position, but you would hope that when we share these services that obviously we share the service through the hard times as well as the good times. So let's hope that Torvine do contribute in due course, and we must continue that pressure. Chief Executive, you want to add?
I was just going to add, Leader, that I do intend to write to the Chief Executive of Torvine County Borough Council. In so many ways, they're a council that has proven to be a good partner of Monmouthshire over the course of the last, over a number of years. And I dare say that there'll be occasions over the next 2 to 3 years when they will be looking to lean on us. So they may want to reconsider an equitable position.
Yeah, thank you for that. Councillor Murphy.
Yes, thank you, Leader. I think a wider point needs to be made here. We, along with all the other authorities in Wales, have been encouraged, if not a bit more than encouraged, by Welsh Government to form collaborations as the magic way forward in solving budgetary constraints. They often are, and I can think of some very, very good ones, as the Chief Executive has said. But the problem is when people pull out, and this isn't the first time that we've been left as the only authority in a collaboration, and effectively saddled. I was about to say something different. Saddled with the consequences of it. And I think it's just one of those very, very sad occasions when attempts to rationalise and be as efficient as we possibly can goes wrong.
Councillor Howard.
Thank you, Leader. A number of questions. I suppose the first one's a small point, really. I know the Quality Impact Assessment states that 2 schools signed up to the SLA, but the report body says 1. But it reminded me of a question that came up at the Abergavenny budget session when I think one of the youngsters from King Henry made a point about, and I don't want to confuse the issue between the school's own library and the library service, but why do we have a library within the school when there's a library in town? And it made me wonder if there's a kind of sea change in practice, and the needs of the schools have differed, e-books, internet and so on. Which brings me on to the question, how well was the service being used before the principle of the SLAs was being introduced? And lastly, I think we can all recall the excitement that youngsters would have on seeing a different object being brought into the classroom, whether it was something like a stuffed owl or an incense burner. What alternatives are there for schools to fill the gap from maybe our own resources like museum service?
There certainly has been a sea change in practice. You're quite right, with the advent certainly of new technologies. That doesn't mean that books have been replaced. It means that there are different ways now of accessing literature and relevant information, and fiction and non-fiction information that historically would have been delivered to your school in a box. How well was it being used? Very well for a number of years, but actually as in the last number of years, the use of the service was dwindling because of the reasons I've just outlined. In many cases, that SLA would have been an historic situation for a school where they simply would have bought in because they did the previous year. But schools, as we all know, are now in a position, have been for some years, of really scrutinising where they spend their money. In relation to the artefacts, etc., that you referenced, Councillor, those artefacts will be shared by our education service amongst our schools, and will be still available to our schools for their use. But equally, schools have also realised that their expenditure on things like valuable artefacts in terms of learning and stimulating objects can also be part of their own library resource within their schools.
Councillor Hackett-Payne.
Just to add to that, the religious artefacts were discussed at SACRE, the Religious Education Advisory Group within the council, and any religious artefacts that have been very kindly donated by the faith reps within our county will be kept within the county. So I'd like to reassure you of that.
Okay, thank you for that. And this service, lots of us will remember this service when it was in the lower floors of the old county hall, and in a bit of a dungeon it was actually. And what a marvellous service it was, back then. And obviously it's diminished as the call on it. But the quality of the artefacts and the boxes of different modules and learning schemes and things were really quite good. And it is sad that we've had to get to this position. But I'm really pleased that we are retaining those artefacts and be able to circulate those within our school community here, because there is some really rich things in there, which I'm really pleased aren't going to get lost. Okay, I'll move to Councillor Petrini.
Thank you. Thank you for the greater clarification, because quite reading it's a poor report, and I hope we can't expect this kind of reporting in the future. It's very unclear about costs, and that's the first time after even asking a question to an officer that I've heard £500,000 if we can continue. So that's come out of nowhere. It's nowhere in the report as far as I can read, that £500,000. So can we expect poor quality reports like this in the future? And secondly, if we're going to avoid some of the redundancy costs, which we have to pay out 188,000 in total, I don't believe that's all redundancy, can we not retrain some of those employees to avoid redundancy costs, as is our organisational report in the carrying on in the Cabinet, which says we'll retrain, develop our members. Can we do that to avoid the redundancy costs? Or?
Okay, it's a very small workforce, and it'd be unfair to be talking about. It's very easy to identify the very small workforce, but I think Chief Executive wants to contribute on it.
I think that's a fair point about the numbers involved, but I can give Councillor Petrucci the assurance that any individual that becomes displaced in our organisation, we go through every process that we possibly can to secure a suitable alternative. Individuals leaving our organisation isn't the first choice. Indeed, it's almost always the last.
Okay, thank you for that. Councillor Howarth?
Yeah, a couple of questions, Leader. The first one is the agreement that we had with Torvine and our Chief Executive now possibly having to go to Torvine and ask them to perhaps contribute even more. Service level agreements that we have with the schools. First question is the school which was looking to sign up, have we guided them in the right direction of where they can go from not being able to take this service? And the second one is, how many agreements have we got out there which actually we're not too sure about with other authorities? Surely we should be getting hold of them and just going through them, making sure that we have tied everybody into paying their fair share and contribution when they do decide to pull out of joint ventures, which we are collaborative working, which we are actually encouraging more of now and doing more of. Can we make sure that the legal side of it is tied up more than what we have at the moment?
I think that's a valid point. We have many long-standing shared services, especially around the education side of things, and various services which we run together. And I think, on the whole, I have confidence. I had confidence in this one that when partners work together closely, it should be expected that we would work together to sort the issues out when they happen. Does this now require us to go and check all of those relationships? I hope it wouldn't. I hope we have strong enough relationships that we can work closely together as we always have done. And however, I'm not envisaging many situations like this, but however, the climate we're facing going forward may put us in this position again. Chief Executive, you wanted to reflect again?
I was just going to say, in terms of Councillor Howard's question, of this type, we host two similar service offers in the children's territory. One is the youth offending service, which we again deliver with Torvine, but we host that service. The second is the Gwent Outdoor Education Service. Gwent is probably a euphemistic term these days. It was once Gwent, but it's become fewer authorities as the years have gone by. Both of those services are in positive current positions, and they are both secure, carrying no liabilities for the council. But they are services that we have to be minded that may again adjust as the councils of Gwent set their budgets, both for next year and the years that follow. There are many other collaborative services that we're involved with, don't get me wrong, but they're two similar pooled budget services that we host.
Yeah, I've just come to mind, many years ago we had the Gwent Education Forum, don't get confused with anything now, and we had several things like the Visual Impairment Service, Hearing Impairment Services, the Welsh Service and things. What's happened to those then?
They still exist, but we don't host them. Where you host, you carry some accounting responsibilities, which is why I focused on the youth offending service and the Gwent Outdoor Education Service, two services we host.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for that. Yeah, clearly, yeah. Councillor Murphy, or sorry, Councillor Hackett-Payne, was it?
I was just going to add that the one school that did want yes, they have been contacted, just so you know.
And just to add, Leader, that some of the joint arrangements that we've gone into over the last couple of years that I've got contact with, all of them have got exit terms, all of which guarantee that anybody exiting shares their share of any liabilities.
Okay, thank you for that. Right, I will move us on then to the recommendations in 2.1 to agree to close the School Literacy Resource Centre and end the loan service to schools in Monmouthshire and Torvine to achieve the 2015-16 £20,000 saving in our base budget. To agree agree to resource Monmouthshire's share of the costs, £194,786 associated with closing the service from reserve funding. And 2.3 to agree to distribute Monmouthshire's portion of the resources, including books, historical artefacts and religious resources, to schools, museums, libraries and the Family Literacy Service in Monmouthshire. The sale or recycling of the book stock and shelving may generate a very small income that would be shared proportionally with Torvine. However, given the age of the stock, this could be not particularly valuable. Again, let's just reflect on the deeper understanding of the report as well, which put more context around this. And to answer Councillor Petruni's point, I would hope that we would have reports in the future which do give some more detail on this, and it was remiss that this wasn't spotted sooner to make sure that level of detail was in there that we needed. So those recommendations, can I move those? All in favour? Thank you very much. Okay, can I move on to the next report then, and that's informing the future of cultural services here in Monmouthshire. Councillor Greenland.
Thank you, Leader. We're fortunate in Monmouthshire in having some valued cultural services, and just to remind you of what they are, we've got 3 town museums, we've got Caldicott Castle and Country Park, Tintern Station and the Shire Hall in Monmouth, much valued by the communities. And as you will see from this report, the museums themselves add 1.25 million to the local economy. So they're not just valued in cultural terms, but in economic terms, they are a very valuable asset. However, we know, don't we, that we have got to change. The budget pressures that we have would simply mean that if we went on as we are doing at the moment, the time would come, and it would be not too far away, when we would simply not have the money to run these services and they would close. Now, they deserve not just to decline, but these services deserve to have new life brought into them and a new positive future going forward. And they can have that, but not with the same level as we've been, the way we've been doing things in the past. And it's interesting that a very recent report commissioned by the Local Government Association for Birmingham University, or by Birmingham University and Grant Thornton, has indicated that councils will have to, this is not just in Wales, this is right throughout the United Kingdom, they will have to change, and the word that they term is they will have to use adaptive innovation, or else they will simply be managing decline over the next few years. So we need to find the new and the right model for the delivery and the continuation and the improvement of our cultural services here in Monmouthshire. Now, we have had a piece of work done in the past, and that has indicated that there are ways of doing this, but we really now need to be much more focused on bringing forward a new model for the future. It is not something that we can do from within the council. We don't have the resources to do it. Neither do we have the objectivity that a report of this sort needs. So we do need to go out and commission a report, and I make no apologies for that, because we are talking about a new future for important cultural services for Monmouthshire. So what this report is doing is detailing a way forward. We wish to go out and commission the report. We have put a £30,000 budget on that, less than other councils are spending, I might say, perhaps on similar reports, because we have got some background information to begin with. But we need this to come forward within a timeline of 6 months, so that we can begin to implement this new model come the 15 and 16 financial year. So that is what we're asking for, and I would hope that Cabinet members would be supporting it.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Greenland. I think we can all see the need to perhaps take this approach forward, and many of us were engaging with public for the last couple of weeks and trying to understand what's important to people and helping them understand the pressures on local authorities, and also recognising too that as we have to protect and invest in those big statutory services, that things like the discretionary elements we have, the very valuable services which bring value to people's lives, are going to be more and more in the spotlight. And if we really value the cultural heritage we have and the offer we have, I think it's absolutely right. We try to find a way which is different than the old traditional way to perhaps sustain that cultural offer, especially in a place like Monmouthshire. Is such an important part, as we heard, in our economy, and it's very special. Things, like the Nelson Museum, are really, really special. So if we can find a way to get a model which sustains them into the future and preserves them and enhances them and beyond what we can do as a local authority strapped with cash and under huge constraints, I think we've got to go for it. I don't like the idea of commissioning work because it costs money, but however, I do recognise with the capacity of this organisation, which is stretched, really, really stretched, we haven't got that capacity in-house to do that objective piece of work which Councillor Greenland spoke of. I think it's absolutely appropriate in the desire to retain these services going forward, that we invest sensibly in that. So I wholeheartedly agree with the report and look forward to that being conducted as soon as possible. Colleague, Councillor Murphy.
Yes, thank you, Leader, and I'd like to just really support what Councillor Greenland and the Leader have just said from a budgetary point of view. There is no doubt we are in danger of losing some of our cultural services, and I totally support initiatives that seek to preserve these services. Otherwise, quite frankly, they're going to be lost. Doing nothing about this is not an option. The result of that is that these facilities and services would be lost. I agree that we don't have the resources in place here and need to get them in, and I say this is a priority, otherwise the inevitable will happen.
Councillor Hackett-Payne.
Thank you, Leader. I think it goes without saying that we most certainly have lots of jewels in the crown of Monmouthshire, and these are things that attract people into our county, and they see what a beautiful county it is and come back again. Reading the report here in 3.3, it sets out, I think there are 6 attractions or cultural services that we have within the county. And I just wanted to make the point that I can remember the report in 2006, and it looked again at how things could be done differently, how we could actually make the services better, perhaps by getting somebody in to manage them all together, or in some way of doing it differently. Just as a point, that report in 2006 looked at the county as a whole and any sort of tourist trails that went in and out of the county, because tourism doesn't have any borders whatsoever. And if you're looking at somewhere like the Wye Valley, it goes in and out of Wales, in and out of England. You're in, Monmouthshire, Gloucestershire, wherever. And it may be worth just actually looking at, instead of just looking at our boundaries, but actually looking at the tourist trails on either side and perhaps incorporating those, because there are elements that are perhaps privately owned by other authorities within those trails that actually might be more of an attraction to somebody perhaps coming in to look at this and doing it differently than perhaps just our own assets. But then the Nelson Museum itself, I think, will attract lots of people in, because it has the biggest artefacts of Nelson anywhere in the country. So I can see that people will be flocking in to be able to do that. So that in itself is a huge jewel.
Councillor Howard.
Thanks, Leader. Paragraph 3.3, again, it's that list of cultural attractions, and I acknowledge that those are identified as perhaps main sites, and there's a difference between those and other places in that they're staffed as undercover accommodation, so on and so forth. But how is this likely to encompass other attractions? And obviously, being somewhat parochial, I'm thinking somewhere like Clydach Ironworks. And the second point, and appreciate the capacity issues and the necessity to get somebody in to undertake the work, how will you ensure then that they have sufficient depth of the county, understand the local significance and the political dimensions of the council, so that you don't end up at a point where you virtually have to revise and rewrite the report once they've left?
Sorry, Kelly, do you want to respond to that?
Yes, thank you, Leader. On the first point that Councillor Hackett-Payne made, I think it's a really well-made point. And if you look at 3.8 in the report, I've started to really address that there by saying that a one-size-fits-all trust or a similar mechanism isn't going to benefit us. We can look at artificial boundaries and we can look at artificial tourism markets, but you'll see later on the agenda today there's a report about the local development strategy and us working together with Newport and to a smaller extent with Torvine, because we recognise these things like tourism, like economic markets, they don't respect traditional administrative boundaries, so we've got to take different approaches. And we've got great infrastructure, haven't we? We've got the Wye Valley Area of Outstanding Natural Beauty. That's a great partnership we can play into. We've got the relationship with Brecon Beacons. So we do have this wider context to consider, and we feel very confident that our report, our feasibility, will recognise all of those factors. On the point made by Councillor Howard, we will definitely be looking at, Angiddy, we'll be looking at, as you say, the Clydach Ironworks. All of that will be thrown into the picture. I mean, we do little with those sites already. I think there are some interpretation boards. They're not well looked after. But we see this really as an opportunity to enhance their profile and to seek some major investments in making much more of those sites as well. And I think as regards the focus of the brief, the whole exercise, as Councillor Greenland's already alluded to, we've got a stack of information already. We had a report back in 2006. We've already got a Museums Development Trust, which is a fundraising body, and they're doing a tremendous amount of work. So context, recognition of our place, what we're doing, we've got that really in spades. So this exercise isn't about starting anew or starting afresh. It's about building on the very strong foundations that we have, but giving us a clear business strategy as we seek to move forward.
Thank you, Kelly. Councillor Petruni.
Thank you. Two questions. Just so I'm absolutely clear, we're paying £30,000 to private consultants so we can get rid of our cultural assets. That's effectively what we're saying, just so I'm clear in my mind. Also, is this an admission of failure, given that we spent a considerable amount of money trying to make them, in want for a better word, profitable or less costly in recent years? And are we just saying now, actually, we can't generate that revenue from these assets, and that we just have to think of other ways of getting rid of them?
Thank you for those questions. Perhaps I'll take Councillor Howard's questions as well, and I'm sure Councillor Greenland will respond.
Yeah, just one question for Kelly. Plan B is clear decision-making procedures. If we have 6 months to formulate a report of where we go. That takes us now to next April, when we've set the budget. We will have set the budget. What happens if it takes another 6, 8 months, 12 months to transfer everything, if we've got some real positives from this? Does that mean we're still going to fund them and help them go along? Will we have to amend the budget?
Thank you for that. Perhaps I will allow Kelly to answer that specific point of Simon's first, and then invite Councillor Greenland in to deal with what Councillor Petruni was asking.
Thank you very much, Leader. There will absolutely need to be very clear and transparent decision-making processes. This is already on the work programme for Economy and Development Select Committee, so it will be going back to them regularly. We're doing an exercise now where we're talking to all of the town councils, the town teams, because as part of the commissioning process for this work, we want to try and get as many people together as possible, because as I've said already, we don't want a one-size-fits-all model. This has to be something that reflects the local distinctiveness and the sense of place in our towns. So it won't be just us as a commissioning body. We're looking to extend that to as many other stakeholders as possible. And of course, we can't manage it by committee, but as Councillor Hackett-Payne has said, this means something very different to each of our towns. So we've got to try and engage through those mechanisms that we have. As regards the budget for next year, we do have an indicative target, but that target will stand alone. So irrespective of the outcome of this work, we do have a plan for arriving at our target for next year, which doesn't really depend on this piece of work. It would be nice if we could get this in time, and it would obviously enhance what we can deliver next year. But let's not forget, this isn't a budget-saving exercise in isolation. There will always be a need for this council to subsidise whatever body or entity that we look to create, because it's going to be very difficult, you know, to make this self-reliant in a short space of time. And Leader, after Councillor Greenland's made his response, if I could add to that, please. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Greenland.
Oh, it is disappointing, though probably not surprising, that we do get the sound bite for the press, isn't it? And I would really question such a remark after all that you've heard in actually taking a positive attitude in moving these services forward. And I would just perhaps put a question to you, Councillor Petruni. What's your answer? Would you just be prepared to manage decline until you can no longer pay for these services and they close completely?
Okay, Kelly.
Thank you very much, Leader. I think the point that I was going to make was that probably about a year ago we brought to you the business plan, the annual business plan for Caldecott Castle and Country Park. And I remember stating very clearly at that time, this report will be good for the next 12 months, but beyond that, it's not sustainable. And that goes really for all of our cultural services. And it's not just because we can't be wholly commercial. We can't. There are too many constraints when you operate as a council to be wholly commercial. And it's not just because we can't attract grants externally, and it's very difficult for us to do that as a council, as you know. But the fact that we have to consider is lots of these cultural attractions and assets need major investment. And Ian and I had a recent feasibility report on Caldecott Castle. And if we were just going to do some basic work there, we're looking at more than £3 million just to invest in the fabric of that building. You know, that's clearly beyond our competency at this time. You know, the point about then, are we just giving money to private consultants? Across the 6 sites and the other areas that Councillor Howard has mentioned as well, we have 16 full-time equivalent members of staff. Just 16. So if I was going to say, yes, it's that member of staff, they would be leaving a single member of staff to run a building on their own, which just isn't viable by any means. That's the level of capacity that we're talking about. And I'd also make the point as well that the staff that we have are fantastic. You know, they're fantastic advocates for the service, but they're curators. You know, what we're asking from this piece of work is something entirely different. And I think as well, if they were here, they'd agree with me. This can't be time for vested interest. This has to be an impartial, independent piece of work. And that's what we're seeking through this report.
Thank you, Kelly. I don't think I need to add any more. I think both Councillor Greenland and yourself put it into real context. And this is so much more. This is not about trying to just get rid of services. It's actually finding a way to invest and sustain them, recognising their significant importance to the whole economy and to what's so special about Monmouthshire. So I will move us then to the recommendations on to 1, 2, 2 and 2, 3. 2.1, to approve the need for a detailed examination of the options and opportunities to inform the future of Monmouthshire County Council's core cultural services and attractions. 2.2, to agree investor redesign funds of up to £30,000 in commissioning an independent examination of the options and the development of a business strategy with which to support the model of future service delivery, and to approve that the piece of work is commissioned and completed within 6-month time frame with updates to Economy and Development Select Committee in order that the service can begin implementations of findings in 2015-16. All in favour of those recommendations? Thank you very much. Okay, let's move on to the next item, and this is the written feedback report from Estin monitoring visit, the second one we had back in June. The attached letter is to the Chief Executive, and I will ask him to reflect on its findings in a moment. We have presented, this is the second one we would have presented to Cabinet, and I know this has been presented to the Children and Young People Select Committee. And it gives a resume of the last 12 months or more, or nearly 2 years actually. But I think what I was very pleased about reading was the recognition, whilst there is still a journey to be continued along, that there have been some step change in many ways. And I was pleased to read that, and I was pleased to receive the feedback. However, there are issues still in there, and there will always be issues. When you're constantly driving for continuous improvement, there will always be things you can improve on and do better. So I think it's a positive step along a journey of recovery, which I'm confident we are making and will continue to make over the next months. Can I invite Chief Executive, as the letter was specifically to you?
Thank you, Leader. I don't think I've ever spoken so much in a Cabinet meeting. Context, you all know the context. A disappointing inspection back in November 2012, an issued report February 13, midway through February 13, an agreed post-inspection action plan, etc., etc. And as the Leader has just said, this letter, which is not necessarily an open letter actually, there's no particular need to share this with Cabinet or indeed the public, is an important second milestone, because our recovery is populated by 3 visits from Estin, 3 monitoring visits. This is the second. We have our third, which I read as actually being a mini re-inspection, actually, which I think is now likely to be in March of next year rather than November of this year, as we were originally expecting. That's not through any fault or issue of our own. It's just a scheduling issue for Estin. So it's not a particularly big deal. And I think, yeah, there are some quite pleasing things to be drawn from this letter. But I think context is everything. I think it was a blow to the organisation and to the wider community back in 2012. And I think the decision taken at that point in time to actually look at a fundamental rebuild of our education service was the right decision, although not necessarily the quickest way to deliver, I guess, rapid improvement if you wanted to see something inside 2, 3, 4 weeks. But what we wanted to do was to rebuild a service that was sustainable, that was fundamental, and would have little chance of ever positioning the authority in the position that we are now, I think, successfully recovering from. So where do we find ourselves now? As I say, monitoring visit 2. In the verbal feedback that we received from the inspection team, there was a statement that I actually wasn't expecting to hear. I know others receiving the verbal feedback were overjoyed to hear it, but I wasn't expecting to hear. And the statement was, "We observe step change." This will surprise members because I never write anything down, but I wrote that down. We observe step change. And I've never been looking for step change, really. I've always believed that this process was about blood, sweat and tears. It's graft. It's hard work. And fundamentally rebuilding a service is about recalibrating vision, strategy, structure, systems, style, the measures that are important. It all goes into the mix. And that story, I think, in the early days, I think we struggled to capture in a post-inspection action plan. We developed a post-inspection action plan, which in my view was as good as any that you see, but it tends to be activity-based. What we had to relearn was what's impact all about and how do you know. And I think if members recall the letter that we received from Monitoring Visit 1, which was principally a monitoring visit around safeguarding, it effectively said we can see good signs that your processes and your systems have been rebuilt. But stretch. We expect more. We want to see that you can answer the so what questions and the how do I know questions routinely. So they were asking us, expecting us to be better. That was their conclusion from Monitoring Visit 1. I think this letter starts to give you some comfort that they observed that we are and we were getting better. Again, this is dated now. This is several months ago, and we're dealing with a dynamic, emergent process. And indeed, only yesterday I was sat in Select Committee listening to Sarah and her colleagues present to Select a report that will come to your next Cabinet, which is, where are we now with safeguarding? What have we done to build those layers of self-evaluation so that we can fundamentally answer the question with confidence, how do we know that children are safe? Because that's what it comes down to, really. So I would suggest to you that you receive this letter as another milestone. I think it indicates that we're on the right path. I think it indicates that we are asking the right questions of ourselves. And when it comes down to it, it's all about outcome, isn't it? Really, you can become preoccupied with process, but it's all about outcome. And I think the summer outcomes for children this year suggest to us that we are on the right path. It was pleasing to see what I would describe as some pretty stellar performance at A-level. Delighted with some of those things that I saw, not just in terms of the quality of outcome, but the sheer number of young people getting good passes. The quantity and the quality was there. I was happy with that. I was nervously waiting then for the Key Stage 4 outcomes, GCSE. And I'd say I was pretty pleased with those as well. We have to reflect that we've now emerged from the pack at Key Stage 4. We are now leading Wales at the platinum level, which is level 2+. 5 GCSEs with English and maths. We have further to go. This isn't the voice of complacency. We have further to go, but we are moving. Key Stage 2, again, we're in the top 3 this year. I suspect if there were stronger moderation and calibration across Wales, I suspect we'd be in the top 2. But top 3 will do. We've held a very strong position. And foundation, the very young ones, we continue to lead the nation. So if we're interested in outcomes, and I would say there is more to go, we will go further, there is still headroom for us, we will find it. But we can now start to demonstrate a trajectory which suggests that we know what we're doing. It suggests that the practice that now is in place in our schools is meaningful. And it suggests to me that we have a leadership capacity within our reformed education service that's on the ball. So I don't derive tremendous amounts of pleasure from this letter. It's a staging point, but it was an important staging post. March is a very big deal for this organisation, and you should expect your officers to be confident that come March, we will be in a condition where we can be released from special measures. That's the goal that we're working for. So I guess that would be my introductory comments. I'm not sure, Sarah, whether there is anything that you would want to add to that as Chief Officer.
Yeah, thank you, Chief Secretary. Sarah, is there anything you'd like to add at this point?
I think Paul's more than covered what's needed to be said. Suffice to say that we are in a much stronger, more confident position, but we are not complacent. We're working very hard.
Thanks, Sarah. And I think it is an important point you made, actually, Paul. I mean, this Chief Exec, sorry, that this monitoring visit was in June. And we act swiftly on any recommendations, inconsistency on report writing or something like that. You know, some of those in there, and we've acted swiftly on those. And I think we've seen a marked change in those areas which were still found as light. I was reflected earlier on the recent EAS scrutiny challenged by our scrutiny committee, and hearing again those figures that Chief Executive just shared about the improvement, how, you know, comparing Monmouthshire's figures against Wales and against the consortia area, we're not talking small improvements, huge improvements. You know, they are huge, and that's down to a massive effort from the schools, the teaching staff, our LEA staff, and our EAS working together. And I have absolutely now, as leader, every confidence that we will come out of that judgment we found ourselves in 2012. And I was as unhappy as anybody. I was one of the most difficult days of my life when I was living through the feedback from that original Estin inspection. And it did take a while to get to grips, to really accept some of that. But very clearly, we know I've seen a lot over the last couple of years, and I'm really, really pleased about the way we are moving forward. However, complacency is something I'm certainly not complacent anymore, and I'm looking forward to seeing the data we've had benchmarked against free school meals, because that's a real test, because that's the one we were judged on when we had Estin, the calibration against some of those key indicators. But I am confident, and I am looking forward to Estin coming back, just so that we can actually get on with this journey at even more pace. I'm sure Councillor Hackett-Payne would like to reflect, because Liz has had a huge amount of work and carried out a huge amount to help us on this recovery journey, and I do thank her for that, her part in this so far.
Thank you very much, Leader. And yes, I think we can see, if we look back, we can see, like you say, the journey we've been on. And I think we can see some definite changes. And that is being evidenced, as we are always being asked for, in the exam results and the target setting that's being set. I'm going to say nothing more than that, because I think the letter, in effect, is encouraging.
Colleagues, anything else? No? Councillor Petruni?
We all do want to get this council out of Estin, and I accept this report in the main is very good, and I'm particularly pleased to see the authorities making better use of performance data on vulnerable learners to inform service planning and evaluation. That pleases me greatly. However, it's really important that we're honest with ourselves. And what worries me is the page 119, if you want to reference this. Senior leaders were initially unwilling to accept the findings of the 2012 inspection. It took around a year for them to fully appreciate the gap between Estin's judgments and the authority's own evaluation of its services. And it goes on about elected members not understanding and officers not providing accurate and relevant information. I'm just concerned why it took us a whole year, for us to get our heads around this. I can understand the first weeks and months being disappointed with results, maybe defensive, but a year worries me greatly. And I know the Chief Executive talks about good results in foundation stage and key stage 2. To the best of my recollection, we've always actually done really well foundation phase and key stage 2. We've dipped in key stage 3 and 4, and I understand key stage 4 we've improved slightly. But I don't know if the FSM are out results, but we've always underperformed in that area, our most vulnerable people, vulnerable children. I'm just wondering, are we seeing a marked improvement in that area.
Thank you, Councillor Petrucci. Did you want to respond directly, Paul?
Yeah. I think if Esther and colleagues were here, they wouldn't be surprised to hear me say this. I don't necessarily agree with all of the language always used. I think there was a huge amount of disappointment in the early days post-November 12. But I won't be the only person sat in this chamber today that can remember a particularly fiery, vocal meeting of the full council, where the enormity of the job that we faced was, I think, very clear to all. And council, across political divide and indeed officers, committed that, you know what, this is the job of work. And for me, we were on it pretty much straight away. I suspect that some of the sort of an underlying of that sort of sentence is the reality that, do you know what, if you walked around our education service now and you compared the human beings there to the human beings there only two and a half years ago, a lot of them you wouldn't recognise. You know, the part of fundamentally repurposing the service was actually quite a significant churn. And it takes a little while, doesn't it, when you recruit new people, new teams, to actually embed them in an organisation and to get the nuances of a place. So a lot of work, I think, was going on in that time, but not necessarily producing the activity-based outcomes that some would have liked to see. So I do struggle with that particular piece of narrative, and I've made that worldview known to Estin. That said, you know, we're now sat in October 14, and we are looking at a document that says, do you know what, this is starting to look promising. Looking promising is a very different place from having recovered from poor. You know, our platform is recovering from poor and dysfunctional. Our goal, just right now, or my personal goal, is to be judged competent. I can wait a little bit for excellent, but to be judged competent releases the organisation from an agenda and gives us the time and space to further accelerate. So I guess I'm not avoiding the question put by Councillor Petrucci. I'm offering a personal perspective on it. But I guess I would always encourage us to go from where we are. I think our performance around vulnerable children is improving and more consistent. I believe our whole approach around additional learning needs is more secure than perhaps it once was. But if that's a line of inquiry that Councillor Petrucci would choose to continue, I'd invite Sarah to comment on it. And certainly the performance and ability of every child in our system matters. And being clear that every child is being given the opportunity to achieve is what drives our system. The core difference, I think for me, the clear difference between perhaps where we are now and maybe where we once were, is that the local education authority, the council, if you like, is absolutely clear that we stand for children. Nothing else, children. Anything else that gets in the way is dealt with. Children come first and foremost. And I see that now permeating the organisation, perhaps in a way, with hindsight, I would have liked to see it a little while ago.
Thank you, Paul. Sarah, do you want to add to that? Look forward to your view.
Thank you, Leader. I'm quite happy to add to the question around our more vulnerable learners. And part of the hard work that I mentioned briefly has been around a strategic review of additional learning needs across our county. Our core focus and purpose for that review is to be sure that none of our children are slipping through the net, that all our practitioners are serving our most vulnerable learners and not a specific not specific individuals, working with removed situations for our more vulnerable learners, that we in all our schools are identifying additional learning needs earlier, that we are ensuring that the support for children with additional learning needs is there earlier. And in a climate where statements and statementing is actually reducing significantly across the nation, we are ensuring in Monmouthshire that we are introducing and proposing a situation where our families and our children can be sure that they are in a county where children with additional learning needs are vitally important to the success story of our education service.
Yeah, thanks, Sarah. And I think I need to just reflect a tad on your point there as well. That paragraph did make a slightly uncomfortable reading, but I'm not going to start arguing with Estin around their narrative in their letter, because we are where we are now and we're moving forward. I remember that difficult meeting as well as you all do in February 2013. As you know, we couldn't release any information until we'd received all of the results formally. And I totally relieved from that point that we were flat out trying to address the issues. Okay, there were areas which we've struggled to improve on, but we've done well in recent times around evaluation and those areas. So we had some significant things to do, which I believe, making serious progress in. So I said earlier, when that was one of the most uncomfortable days of my life, when we had the feedback from Estin, and there is a period of denial for me for a couple of days, because it's a really hard decision and unpalatable to take. But I was very clear that we have always had absolute data which was among the top in Wales, albeit Key Stage 4 was poor. However, this was there was a different framework we were looking at, and it very clearly showed to us in a better way, understanding where we sat when benchmarked against those more vulnerable young people. So we learnt a lot at that point, and I learnt a lot at that point. And that has been my focus, as I shared just earlier. That's my focus from then on. In. So, being the best in Wales on absolute data may be good, and it is good, but when you think that the education standards in Wales on the whole are not the best in anywhere near in the wider community, being the best in Wales isn't good enough for Monmouthshire. We've got to be striving, and that's what we continue to do, strive to be far better than what there is in Wales, and look far more internationally than that. So, Councillor Petrucci, I understand you want to come back.
I appreciate your views and the Chief Executive and the Chief Education. Can I have the Cabinet Member for Education's views, please?
If she wishes to respond, yes.
Can I just be clear, my views on the paragraph that we're discussing in here? My views on that are very similar to both the leader and the Chief Executive. It did take time to address the points that were made, and I think in many respects I don't want to relive the whole episode, but we were for many months without any senior officers in the directorate, and in some ways that I think also took time as well, because staff needed a direction, they needed things to be picked up, and they were very much so, but it wasn't really till we had Sarah come into place that we could really start addressing the matters that were in hand. Things were in place, they were going in the right direction, etc., but there needed to be a focus there. I think that in some ways I do agree. I think the wording is perhaps just unfortunate in there, and if we if you were actually in the board meetings, if you were there at the feedback, it didn't quite reflect what was said there. But I don't think there has been any complacency from any member of staff, any elected member, from the Cabinet at all. I think we have always said right from the beginning, this is a matter that needs addressing, it has to be put right, and we will put it right in as quick a time as we possibly can without putting any risk in place. Because the fear is that you do things too quickly and that, yes, things are right, but they don't stay right. So I am very confident and reassured that what is in place is right and it is proper. And I am reassured from this letter that the board also see that as well.
Okay, thank you everybody for their contributions on that. I'm sorry, Councillor Howarth, how could I forget you?
How can you?
Sorry.
Quarter of the council leader. I do appreciate the comments from today from Cabinet and the acceptance that we are moving forward. I think two words which came out today for me, Leader, from the Chief Executive was step change. And I think that's so important in everything we do now in this council. What I'd like to ask Cabinet, the step change, and I'll ask the Chief Executive first of all, the step change means up a step, thinking, learning, have we made the right decision here, up to the next step. I think that's where we're going with that step change. Are we going to adhere by that all the time now? Because that is the most important thing, making sure that when we make a decision, we don't go to the next step till we feel confident and it's right that we go to the next step. I think that's where the report came from, and I think that's where Paul's comments came from also. And that is so important with what we've been doing with the challenge from November 2012. Are we confident that we will not fall back into what we're trying to get out of?
I'll answer that. I am absolutely confident, because this isn't just this is a whole change agenda and a continuous improvement agenda in this council in regard to education. There's so many things have been put in place. We do need, obviously, some time, as the report suggests. They need time to make sure that that change, that step change, that positive movement forward is embedded and sustainable and will continue. And I have every confidence that will be, because of the things we have put in place. You know, the evaluation, the performance management, the appraisal, the strengthened challenge, the whole gambit. Everybody has a part to play in the council in this improvement agenda, which has been recognised in the letter and recognised in our recovery board. I am absolutely confident, and when we have our Estin colleagues back for our third, which I think will be quite early, a full inspection, you know, they will have all the evidence. They know that that is embedded. Councillor Akabane, I know you want to come in.
Thank you very much, and thank you for that question, because I think in effect it was basically alluding what I was trying to say about the time. Because we have spent time with the self-evaluation document, and we've looked at the corporate governance as well, when these things are in place, when that step has been made, it then is almost self-propelling, because that process is there. Then in effect it continues to ensure that you're doing the right thing at the right time. If you don't have those processes there, it's a bit like driving a car. You've got to change the gear by putting the pedal. You can't, it doesn't do it itself. So I'm sure and reassured that we do have those processes in place, so that when, on that lovely day when Estin do go away, it will continue. It's not going to stop. It's not going to be a phew, thank goodness they've gone. It will be great. We've got things in place that can take us to another point, that will take us up another step. It will be another step change.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to move us on, and I'm going to take the recommendation there in 2, that the Cabinet take note of the proposals included in this report and make plans to implement the findings. As I said, lots of that is already happening. 2.1, to monitor the progress of work towards the recommendations contained in the report through the scrutiny of continued self-evaluation in the Children and Young People's Directorate. All in favour of receiving that? Thank you very much. Okay, let's move on to the next item, and this is the People and Organisational Development Draft Strategy. Councillor Murphy.
Thank you, Leader. I think it goes without saying that our staff are our greatest asset, and it has to be right to engage with them even more than we have been doing so far, and we need to extend that into our communities more too. So the recommendation here today is to approve the release of the draft, and it is draft, People and Organisational Development Strategy, to allow that engagement and to get the feedback from the employees and communities ahead of it being presented back to Cabinet, which hopefully will be in December. So it's the latest version of the People Strategy, the previous one in 2012, and it's a different way of thinking about how we engage with our teams and communities so that we can get the changes that we need to respond meaningfully to the severe cuts, the public finance and shifts in public needs and expectations that we talk about so often. So this strategy aims to bring those many facets of people and organisational development we run and to promote into one composite piece that work. And our people must be enabled to have the right tools to operate optimally. There's opportunities here, enable us to focus on what good will look like, give us a greater ability to adapt, provide the workforce with the right skills to meet the changing demands of our organisation and society, and to forge stronger relationships with those people on and off our payroll to unlock the ideas, new solutions, opportunities and resources, and get an approach that belongs to everybody. So it isn't a final document, it isn't a done deal, it's something which is wider than the enterprise or HR directorates. It's there to go out and to form the firm strategy. So there it is, it's a draft strategy. We've got Kelly Byrne, Peter Davis and Lisa Knight-Davis, all of which have been involved in this here, who I'm sure will be happy to pick up any points that are raised.
Thank you, Councillor Murphy, and thank you all involved in pulling this report together. I think absolutely Councillor Murphy caught it that, you know, our staff, our people are our greatest resource, be them in the organisation and those in our communities. And this goes a long way, a huge way, to actually captures the culture, which is so much different here in this authority, I think, as I believe that's in many others. And that's supplemented well with, you know, I thought the quote there from Paul Bevan in the opening parts of the report was really great, because I know how that individual has done some, you know, amazing stuff because we've allowed him to do that, and we've allowed others to do things, and that's the nature of the changing culture we have in this organisation, which I'm very proud of. I thought the report is a good report. There's a lot of things in there. I know it's evolving, it's living, and you know, I'm really pleased that we have it before us today. Colleagues, I'm sure others may wish to say something. Yeah, Councillor Hackapane.
Thank you very much, and yes, it's a good report, and I'm sure that it will benefit the county as a whole. I just wanted to ask about engagement, and engagement, quite often the word communication comes after that. I just wanted to ensure that other areas of the council are informed, are communicated with as far as your engagement side of things, because the last thing anybody ever wants to do, and it isn't anybody's aim, is to confuse the public or set standards very high that can't be achieved. And I just want to make sure that that line of communication is open to all the council, and it doesn't end up just being focused in one direction.
Councillor Petruni.
Thank you. I like this report. It's a very good report. it's engaging our communities and our people, which is something I totally endorse. There's one part that does disturb me, you wouldn't be surprised to hear, Councillor Fox, and it's our view on failure. And I quote, page 9 of the report, 135 of the bundle. We have to expect a steady flow of failure and understand that failing is necessary because it means we're actually doing something. Well, yes, you're failing. I wouldn't say I would endorse that line there, if I'm honest. We can't be so blasé and complacently about failure. So I would put it to the Cabinet. Do you think failure is okay?
I'll respond to that. In the Innovation Lab, we've got a leaflet which is given out, a little card, which I'm sure you've got, fail fast, fail forward. If you don't encourage people to have a go, to try things out, you end up with total stagnation. So that's what that's about. It's encouraging people to have a go and to recognise that if it doesn't work, to say so and find a solution. So it's far more constructive, you'll be surprised to hear, than the opinion that you put over.
I think that just stems from probably the last question, one step at a time, making sure it is working. If it doesn't work, put it right or don't bother.
Kelly, I'm sure you'd like to.
Oh, I can't
add.
wait. Thank you, Leader. What's that famous saying? I haven't failed. I've just found 10,000 ways that don't work. And I think that's quite resonant in this context, isn't it? Because what we're trying to say to people, this isn't about huge risk taking. This isn't about losing the council loads of money or putting people's lives at risk. This is, if you feel that you have an idea, it's got legs, it can be developed, you don't need to check in for permission every 2 minutes. And I think what we're finding, and I'm not speaking for myself here, I'm speaking on behalf of people I connect with every day in the organisation. Paul Bevan from the front line, who's co-wrote the foreword to this document. What they are telling us, and I'm sure they'd be very glad to tell you as well, is that sometimes the view of risk is such that they are scared to have a go because they think the dead hand is going to come down on them and they're going to be in trouble. And you wouldn't believe how inhibitive that is in terms of setting the organisational culture and tone. So the message from me, my colleagues, leadership team, which we're very unapologetic for, have a go, because otherwise we are failing by omission. Now, I recognise that the tolerance levels for failure in times of austerity are not going to be high, but I want to reiterate, we're not talking about losing lots of money. You know, we're not talking about people's lives. We're talking about giving people opportunities to be nimble, to adapt, to change things if they need to. And I have to say, to date, we've managed that process really well. It's given people a feeling of liberty, they can have a go, and that is when you really, really get to uncover and unearth innovation.
Thank you. If hadn't adopted our innovative approach over the years, if we'd have taken that traditional conventional way that Councillor Petruni and Labour Party would like us to adhere to, we wouldn't be well positioned to create the sustainable and resilient communities we're aiming for and driving for. Even though we do that with the lowest funding in Wales, we're constantly at the bottom of the pile. We have to find other ways to do things. However, this is about having belief and faith in our staff. You know, and I'm proud that we're an organisation who's willing to back our staff to do things and come up with real options. And yeah, there may be a failure now and again, but look at the massive positives which outweigh that. And we've seen again and again and again demonstrated in this authority over the last couple of years. So I think the report is a good report. I think it absolutely it gets where it needs to be. And, you know, I'm pleased to have it. Kelly? Again.
Sorry, Leader, I was just going to add one more thing. And very recently I've been asked by Welsh Government to sit on the Innovation Advisory Council for Wales. I'm the only public sector person that's been invited to represent local government. And I think that's quite a coup for Monmouthshire, really, because the reason I've been asked is because, we're seen as having credentials, we have experience. Yes, not everything works, but we're quite open about what doesn't work. And we've iterated and we've adapted and we find ways that do work. So I think that's something that we should note and something to feel very positive about.
Thank you, Kelly. Well, that is good news. I didn't know that. So, yeah, well done. Congratulations on that. Okay, I'm going to move us to the recommendations on this, and that's to approve the release of the draft people and organisational development strategy to allow engagement and feedback from employees and communities ahead of being presented back to Cabinet for approval, and to endorse and promote the draft programme plan as a living document to be updated and refined as further evidence of need is established. All in favour? Thank you very much. Thank you, everybody who contributed to pulling that report together. Can I go on then to the last report of the day, and that is the Vale of Usk Local Development Strategy. Councillor Greenland.
Thank you, Leader, and it's nice to finish the meeting on another high note. We have before us the Vale of Usk Local Development Strategy report and the accompanying strategy document. Now, I don't know whether you've read the entire strategy, but if you haven't, I would certainly commend it to you. I wouldn't exactly say it makes Booker Prize reading, but it certainly is at the top of MCC's reading list, or certainly should be. It is a very well-written strategy and is actually incredibly interesting when you get into it. So I would like to commend the authors of both the report and the strategy itself. So what is the local development strategy? Well, I'm sorry, but it's another new acronym that we have to learn. The Rural Development Plan is the main source of European funding that we have for MCC as a rural county. And that funding is governed by the independently elected, or appointed, I should say, local action group. And they, through our team of officers, Adventa, have been delivering the local development plan in the last few years. Now we are at the point where the previous plan is coming to an end, or in fact has come to an end officially, I think, at this point. And we will be about to embark on the new local development strategy, which will begin in April of next year. Just before we go any further, the report makes reference to us joining together, or as I think the report suggests we call it, brigade forces. Now, that's not a term that I like at all, and I've just checked to make sure before I came here that it wasn't a term that officers introduced, but it is in fact a Welsh Government terminology. What it means is working together, so let's just call it working together, and we intend to work together with Newport Council in this case. The report does make reference also to Torfaen Council, possibly coming in with us on this. But only yesterday we have heard that Torfaen will not be pursuing that joint venture with us. So any references you see in the report to Torfaen, please ignore them, but certainly we are working together on this with Newport. So this is going to provide the absolutely fundamental funding that we need for our rural wards, both in throughout Monmouthshire and in Newport as well. And there is a map attached which shows you which of those wards it refers to. And there is a great synergy between these areas of both Monmouthshire and Newport. And what we intend to do by working together is to achieve maximum results across this whole rural territory. And we can build on historical investment to create a sustainable impact. And the money that is coming from Europe will fund 80% of the programme that we have going forward. It means that we, as a local authority, and indeed Newport, would have to fund the 20% of that funding. And the proposal is that we actually would look to create a reserve so that going forward we can guarantee that our 20% funding will be available to meet the programme. Now the programme will be different from the existing RDP in the way that it is delivered, and in fact it will require quite a lesser number of people to deliver it. The ideas and the proposals will come forward during the period of time, and they will come forward after considerable consultation from members of the public and interested groups. And what we're asking for here is that this strategy, which has already been out to quite a lot of consultation, we've taken it to different workshops, as well as the Monmouthshire Show, the Usk Show, but with this approval from Cabinet, which we're asking for today, we will then be moving forward to a much wider consultation before bringing it back to both local authority cabinets in January, so that we can begin the implementation of this plan in March, was it April next year? So that's the report in brief, Leader. The recommendations are before you in paragraph 2, and I open it for debate.
Thank you, Councillor Green. Yeah, I agree. An excellent report. I went through it in pretty fair detail last night and early this morning, and you know, it's a good read. But what it's the interesting bit. It really is. It's the interesting stuff in there, and I think what you've hit on the nail on the head is about the risks and threats to the rural communities of certainly Monmouthshire and those specified in Newport. You know, that connectivity, the digital stuff, the isolation, a whole raft of things there which are very real problems. And if this you know, this strategy can direct monies to improving those things over the 7-year period, I mean, that is, you know, we can do some real good, as we did with the previous RDP funding. So I welcome that working partnership with Newport. I'm sorry Torvine aren't joining us again, because we've all got the same sort of issues in our rural elements of our communities, but we understand and respect their position in that regard. So thank you everybody who took part in this, and look forward to it actually delivering in the future, and obviously look forward to the feedback from that wider consultation. Colleagues, anybody want to add to this now? No? Councillor Hackapane, yeah.
Just very briefly, I believe it would probably be about Christmas time when you'll know whether you've been successful with the funding. And as everybody else said, it's been quite a good read, but it's almost like you don't know the ending yet. And it would be quite nice to have some update on this.
Oh, and the other thing I was going to raise as well, and I know I spoke to you earlier, Peter, about is obviously there are some staffing implications which alluded to at the end of the report, and we'll obviously be receiving this back, furnished with that, you know, further confirmation of, and we will to receive it back to formally move that those positions are put in place. Yeah, thank you for that. Okay, Giles.
Thanks, Leader. I don't know if I'm being thick, perhaps I've missed something, but the first paragraph, the 1.1 definition of the area and population covered by the strategy, I noticed the two maps of Monmouthshire and Newport, Appendix 1 and 2, but it would appear that all of Monmouthshire wards are included within the strategy, because there isn't any colouring, whereas the Newport wards are highlighted in green that are eligible.
Just to clarify on that point, all of our wards are eligible, either in full or in part.
Other Cabinet colleagues, anything? No? Okay, Councillor Petruni.
It is a very interesting read, Leader, I agree. Is this the first steps to a merger of a council? Because the SWOT analysis seems pretty comprehensive as a basis.
I think my views on merging councils are getting quite well known. Anyway, so I'll take that in the spirit it was delivered in. Councillor Howarth.
Yeah, thank you, Leader. The only criticism I will have is actually getting your head around the resource implications, because when you do read it, it jumps about, and actually I would have preferred that to be a little bit more defined in the report, but it is something which you can get your head around, but as you read it, it's trying to work out 5% of this and so much percent of that. And the other thing is That's a very valid point there about the issue reference to the every ward in Monmouthshire will be part of this I'll say deal or this award that we will be having. Now, how have Newport accepted something like that? Because I'm sure, I mean, we have towns and designated towns which have criterias. How could you explain how we have actually been able to come around from making every ward in Monmouthshire eligible?
I think Peter will answer that because I'm sure there's dictation from above of what constitutes the appropriate award. Peter, do you?
I think, if I may, I'll cover both points that have been raised. In terms of the latter point, you're absolutely right, Leader. It's a case where that's stipulated with specific criteria that Welsh Government have put in place, and conversely that has come from Europe. That ultimately defines the areas of benefit, I guess, both in Monmouthshire and Torfaen. Probably helpful just in terms of clarifying a couple of things on the resource implications, just to, I guess, simplify what is outlined there. The 5% and the 6%, that's just to make reference to the fact that Welsh Government, we are still waiting on absolute finalisation of the level of funding that's due to be coming in from Welsh Government. So it's really just to provide, I guess, a couple of potential scenarios in that effect. We've been informed by Welsh Government that we'll be notified 1st of January on that. That is still the date that they are holding to. So we will get clarification then. Second to that, and in terms of the makeup of the funds that that come forward, there is one block of funds that it's 100% funded from Welsh Government and Europe, and that supports the management and the administration of the whole scheme. And that's a certain amount. And then there is what I see as being the important sum that is received from Europe and Welsh Government. And as Councillor Greenland referred to, that is 80% match funding that obviously goes out there to deliver those valuable projects across our rural communities. The authority has to make up the 20% match funding on that. And just to add to a point that Councillor Greenland made, yes, we will be looking at using a reserve funding mechanism, but that will only allow us to ensure that the revenue budgets that we are currently holding, that they can be used across the 7-year term to cover that match funding element. As you'd naturally expect, as we get into the programme in the earlier years, the amount of money that will be deployed to projects will be probably less than in the later years. There is a profile that is provided in the appendices. Our existing budget wouldn't be sufficient to meet the costs, the match funding element in those later years. Therefore, we are going to be looking to use a reserve funding mechanism to carry forward money through the years to fund those later years.
Thank you for that clarity. Oh, Councillor Harris, you want to come back in?
I welcome Peter to make that point. I'm sure he's in good hands there with his accountancy skills, because I think you'll need it with that anyway. May I just ask then, is this a draft to be finalised? We said this is the first, is this, I call it a draft document, and will this then, the final version, be coming back to Cabinet, or are you endorsing today and not finalising the final version? I'd just like some clarity on that. And will it come back to Council, or will it go to another scrutiny committee just to overlook it? I'd just like some clarity on that, please.
It is a draft. It's going out for wider consultation, and it will be coming back to Cabinet, I would imagine, for ratification after Christmas. It probably needs to go also to Council. I look for advice on that, but because of its budgetary implications, I would imagine that it would be wise, if not necessary, to go to Council as well.
Okay, thank you, everybody. I do like the proposed vision as well. I think that resonated really well with me. You know, a connected territory in a beautiful landscape, focused on fostering thriving communities and building resilient local economies whilst embracing the natural and cultural assets of the area. I think that's absolutely got it really right as a vision that we can deliver against. I really do like that. Okay, I'm going to move us then to the recommendations, and they are into one, to endorse and approve the draft Vale of Usk LDS for wider consultation associated with associated partners, to provide in principle agreement to a 20% match funding contribution required to fund the RDP activities in Monmouthshire wards, acknowledging that a level of budget provision already exists under the existing RDP, and to endorse the current partnership with Newport City Council, and to approve the extended partnership. Oh, you can forget the next bit. Because it's around Torvine and we know that now they're pulling out. Okay, so all in favour of those recommendations? That's it. And that brings our Cabinet meeting to a close today. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope those who may be watching this or will watch it in the future found it informative. And thank you once again. I declare the meeting closed.